Hello and welcome everyone to my physical Animate Weapon Necromancer guide. This build utilizes non-permanent minions with a long duration and can be smoothly transitioned from league start to the endgame. There won't be an in-depth leveling guide, but I did leave a Atlas tree progression and a general skill guide for the campaign in the league start PoE. In addition to that, I also made a video showcasing the leveling process, and I'm going to leave the link to that video in the comments below in case you want to check it out. The League Start version features inexpensive gear, including a couple of cheap uniques. For example, Daresus Courage to get your character pseudo block capped, the Skullhead, which gives your minions attack and spell block, and also life recovery on block, which in addition to Bone Offering and Decay Ward, which is a passive that you can anoint, that will increase minion survivability significantly. In addition to that, you want to get yourself a Convoking Wand that is rolled with a Deafening Essence of Fear for the minion damage modifier, and some generic gear with life and resistances. For flasks, we want a life flask that removes bleeding, Rumi's Concoction, or in the beginning just a generic granite flask, a quicksilver flask with additional movement speed, quartz flask with increased armor for the phasing, and an amethyst flask with reduced shock effect for the chaos resistance. For jewels, we're looking for Ghastly Eye jewels with minion attack and cast speed and flat added physical damage. For the Spectres, you want to get yourself the 2 Chieftains to get charges for the minions, and a Demon Harpy. The Demon Harpy has a skill called Screech that applies a stackable debuff that increases physical damage taken by 3%, and a single cast gives you 10 stacks, with the maximum amount of stacks being 20. So you either have to use 2 Demon Harpies, which we can't do in the beginning, so instead we link our Raise Spectre gem with Spell Echo to get the maximum amount of stacks and thus 60% increased physical damage taken, even at League Start. For Animate Guardian, we want Relentless Fury to give it Culling Strike, Leercast to increase the damage of our minions, Wake of Destruction so it can drop Shock Ground while moving, a pair of Hunter-influenced gloves with the Intimidate modifier, Zendathis' Cassock to Chaos Cap our Guardian's resistances, and to enable it to create a consecrated ground when blocking, which in itself is already powerful, but is made even better in combination with the Broken Faith, which will then turn the consecrated ground into Profane Ground. In case you don't know, Profane Ground gives 1% a flat critical strike chance and minus 10% to all resistances to affected enemies. For the gear progression, you wanna be getting yourself a helmet with +2 levels of minion skill gems, potentially an open prefix for the crafted life modifier and some resistances. And for the chest, you want to be getting a Skin of the Lords. Just make sure to get one that allocates an Atlas key passive that doesn't brick your build. For example, getting something like Blood Magic is really bad because it removes all our mana, which means we either can't use our auras or we would have to use life to fit those auras, which is even worse in my opinion. For the mid-league setup, we want to go for Chaos Inoculation, which means we need ES-based gear, including things like Aegis Aurora for the energy shield recovery on block. In addition to that, we're looking for a proper minion cluster with increased passive effect, minion attack and cast speed, a Skin of the Loyal with the +2 level of Socketed Minion Gems, Corrupt Implicit. Proper Hubris Circlet with the +2 level of Minion Skill Gems as a Fractured modifier, so we can roll the item with Deafening Essences of Loathing for the explicit Mana Reservation modifier, in addition to the implicit Mana Reservation modifier and Minion Move Speed or Minion Life that you can craft with Eldritch Currency. It's also a good idea to get an amulet with +1 level of physical skill gems, which scales our Animate Weapon, our Animate Guardian, our Carrion Golem, Determination, and of course Molten Shell. There's one more noteworthy item, and that is the Graven's Secret, which gives us Energy Shield, Mana, Lightning Resistance, and turns power charges that we generate into absorption charges. And the absorption charges, they give us Energy Shield recoup against elemental damage taken. This in addition to Divine Shield, which allows us to regenerate a portion of the physical damage prevented, and CI, which makes us immune to chaos damage, allows us to mitigate all 3 types of damage that we're going to encounter, increasing our survivability significantly. We of course also want to get a proper minion wand with +2 levels. This is best done by getting yourself a wand that has a fractured damage modifier, and then rolling this wand with a combination of corroded, shuddering, metallic, and either jagged or bound fossils. The bound fossils are better because they increase the chance of having minion-based suffixes, but they can only be used on convoking wands eye level 76 or 82. If you are rolling a convoking wand eye level 83 or higher, you have to use jagged fossils to eliminate a newly eligible modifier. For the Crucible mods, we're looking for the double crit mod, so the generic minion crit mod, either the standard crit mod or the mod that gives more crit but has the 10% reduced attack and cast speed downside. And of course the animated lingering blades have plus 1.5% to critical strike chance modifier as well. For our Ghastly Eye Jewels, we're looking for attack and cast speed, flat physical damage, and energy shield, and potentially an additional modifier, like avoid being ignited, for example. For our medium cluster jewel, we want to get one with Feasting Fiends, so our minions can leech damage, and Life from Death, which allows minions to recover a percentage of life on minion death, which essentially prevents cluster failure, meaning that once a bunch of minions die, the others are being healed, preventing further minions dying. For our Spectres, we should be able to get our hands on a 4th Spectre if you get yourself a level 21 Ray Spectre gem. And for the 4th Spectre, you can simply get yourself another Demon Harpy to increase the uptime of Screech. And for the Animate Guardian, we're looking at Gravebind, which allows our Guardian to count nearby enemies killed as killed by itself, which in combination with an Explodey chest, so a Crusader chest with the Explode modifier, allows it to explode entire packs, increasing our clear speed significantly. The damage of these explosions is scaled further by using the Brainrot Whalers. And on top of all of that, we also give it a Cold Attuned Buckler, which is a heist-based, allowing the Guardian to inflict brittle on enemies when it blocks their damage. Which brings me to the endgame version. In general, it's pretty similar to the mid-league approach, but with much better rolls and implicits. For example, the Convoking Wand should have properly rolled suffixes, so double crit modifiers. And of course, better, or rather more, Crucible modifiers, for example, the flat added physical damage and the explicit minion modifier, Crucible mod. We're also looking for proper minion clusters, so clusters that have the increased effect, minion attack and cast speed, flat ES, and in addition to all of that, either a resistance or attributes. Personally, I'm not a big fan of the vicious bite because the damage increase isn't that large, because you also lose one of the passives, meaning you lose minion damage, you lose the attack and cast speed portion of that. And you trade a small increase in damage for essentially around, let's say, 70 to 80 resistances or, well, a specific attribute, and it simply isn't worth it, in my opinion. In addition to that, we also want a proper minion shield with increased damage, critical strike chance, a plus level. Doesn't have to be minion spell skill gems, can be physical too, because our main minions all have the physical tag. And of course, we also want the maximum elemental resistances, if possible tier 2 or higher. And I've already made a video on how to craft minion shields like this. I'm going to leave the link to that video in the comments below in case you want to check it out. The Hubris Circlet should have properly rolled explicits and maxed out implicits. This is especially relevant for the mana reservation efficiency, which we need to fit all the auras. This is also why we want to get an Ashes with a very high increased reservation efficiency roll. And of course a small cluster jewel with mana reservation and increased passive effect, ES, attributes, reservation, the entire thing, similar to the large clusters too. And if you get all of that, you should be able to fit all the auras you can see here, our offensive auras, something like Tempest Shield, which is of course not an aura, but also reserves mana, and things like Determination, Pride, and Discipline. In the end, minion builds, at least at the high end, are aura stackers for your own minions, of course. Outside of that, you also want to get a Skin of the Loyal with both the Duration and Minion Gem, Corrupt Implicits. For the remaining jewelry, we want flat and increased energy shield modifiers. And in case you don't know how to make them yourself, I made a video about this, and I'm going to leave the link to that video in the comments below. For our Ghastly Eye jewels, we're now looking for energy shield, minion damage, if you've used a minion skill recently, minion attack and cast speed, and minion flat physical damage. For the Spectres, you can replace one of the Demon Harpy with an Arena Master once you hit around 100 million DPS or so, because at that point the boss fights are so short that the Screech uptime is pretty much perfect even with just one Harpy. For the Animate Guardian, you wanna get a Kingmaker. For the Culling Strike, the Crit Strike multiplier, and the Fortification. A helmet with nearby enemies take 12% increased physical damage. That's the elevated modifier, of course. In addition to that, also the Shocking Conflux, which allows our Guardian to inflict shock even when dealing physical damage, which in itself isn't that strong, but we can increase the effectiveness of it with the Storm Charger. which is an inexpensive unique. Just make sure to get one that has a high roll for the effect and duration of lightning ailments. In addition to that, I would also recommend to recraft a Guardian chest with better modifiers, specifically a higher explosion modifier. It doesn't have to be the elevated modifier. Tier 2 is more than enough in my opinion. And the other one is a hunter modifier, and I would heavily recommend you to get an elevated one, because the difference between the normal modifier and the elevated one, which is 15 and 25% of life regenerated every 4 seconds respectively, is significant, and as such is worth the investment. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the guide. If you have any questions or suggestions, you can leave them in the comments below. I'm trying to get to them as soon as I can. And I'll see you in the next one.